I'm going to use the excuse for a little bit again of particle physics instead of stooping as low as some people might into realms of Christianity and Judaism and metaphysics. Anything that makes any immediate sense to the bourgeoisie. Two areas in particle physics that come to mind again is this eternal problem, at least for 3 or 4 decades, of the physicist trying to decide how much effect the observation at that level has upon that which is being observed. And one of the great interpretations and attempted ways around this has become the theorem or the interpretation that a particular atom or particle at that level, instead of worrying about in what state does it exist and how is it being affected when we observe it under such and such conditions, how do we know what it would have been had we not observed it, now that we are at such a level that we are participating in our own, in the objects of our observation, is this kind of interpretation, this kind of hard-nosed theory, I guess, workable theory, that any particular atom or particle doesn't actually exist until it is observed, which of course to the ordinary sequential mind is irrational, but that there are no characteristics that in essence this particular little atom does not exist. You don't have to worry about it until it is measured, until it is observed, and then what it is, in what way it's observed is simply what it is. That the, in a sense, I guess they might agree with this, that the act of observing it creates it. Another aspect that they keep wrestling with, I believe at one time was referred to as non-local, a non-local theorem, that the mere isolated attempt to observe a particular atom or particle was not the extent of what was taking place, that it was not a localized endeavor. Again, I would assume that they would go this far with me, that everything in the universe is connected with that one observation. Now, I believe that was known as Professor Bell's non-local theorem. At any rate, enough of physics, other than the fact I point out to you again, do you not find it curious that every time I strain myself enough to look back or to look at the present about what's going on a superficial level in physics, that it sounds like something I was talking about 2 or 3 years ago? Is it not curious? It's no more curious than I don't sound religious, which is the same thing. All right, these two notions, I just can't resist bringing some of this up because life itself is now beginning to consider such information, beginning to talk to itself in certain ways, except one reason I keep bringing this up, as I point out to you, is how far removed this is based upon past occurrences sequentially to what would appear to be the hunger, the potential feeding of transcendental, metaphysical, spiritual needs. But now all of that I just mentioned, those two approaches, those two attempts to explain the very curious nature of the sub-observable world, the particle world, it is the connectedness of everything. It is life being like an endless verb until consciousness nouns it to death. Or at least until consciousness and observations noun it. I keep playing with certain terms and sketching out maps having to do with this. But at least for the night, let me expand into my own greatest theorem, or idea, notion, term, the infinite statement. That is what life is. At times me referring to it as an unfolded map, as a seamless fabric, and then that consciousness can only deal with it, that we can only be conscious of something in the ordinary sense, when we can separate it, when we can isolate it, when we can apparently analyze it, that is, compare it to something else on a digital, on a binary basis, and then be able to remember it. Of course, the final part, the memory, it has to be a digital setup to be able to remember anything. You cannot remember it without a comparison. You cannot remember it without its apparent opposite. All of this is turning, at least according to the pictures I have attempted to sketch for you in the past, is turning a non-ending verbalization. Life, that is, being a verb, or being continual action, is turning it into a noun, being able to isolate it. But in my temporary October '86 line I was going to give you is what consciousness is doing, is taking the infinite statement, capital T, capital I, capital S, and rendering it into a sequential comment, into a sentence. That whenever consciousness is dealing with anything, whether it apparently has to do with physics, or whether it has to do with morals, whether it has to do with spiritual hungers, intellectual curiosity, that which appears to be strictly material, all the way to that which apparently would be non-material, the world of psychology, spirit, and all of that. But to do so, you have got to take an infinite statement, which would be what life is itself, and you have got to break it down into sentences. It cannot be an infinite statement. It would be as bad, I guess, as looking back at some of these transcripts, glancing over them, as bad as me taking off and at times listening to the rhythm of my voice. We go many miles between periods. That sentence is going for pages. I would simply point out to you, without no apology to my use of the King's English, I would point out that I had a very good role model. That life itself is an infinite statement. But to make any sense of it on the ordinary level, to deal with it, to comment on it, to apparently manipulate it, to apparently be able to live with it, ordinary consciousness must take this infinite statement. No periods anywhere. Damn few commas, if the truth be known, and I don't know why not. But ordinary consciousness must rent, must break down the infinite statement into sentences. Ordinary consciousness must deal with the appearance to it of capital letters, that is the beginning of a sentence. Well, I got it backwards. I should say it's got to deal first with a period. That apparently something that just went before has ended, and then it has got to believe that it can see the beginning of a new sentence. This is the basis of apparent sequential information. This is the basis of the usable food for ordinary consciousness, for the mind, for the yellow circuit. But all the ideas of some great moment of epiphany, of a higher state of consciousness, of some spiritual state in which a man knows more than he would ordinarily know, some condition in which a man seems to be aligned with forces that are greater than, more explosive than, the mundane ones necessary to sustain everyday life, all the way from that to the physicist attempting to peer into the nature of reality. I am suggesting to you most strongly what they're all looking for is what they are in the midst of, and that is the infinite statement. There is no beginning, there is no end to it. But anything that you want to know is in there. And according to time and place, the infinite sentence, although it is not limited to a three-dimensional sequential existence, ordinary consciousness would see it this way, if it would go along with my little picture, that the infinite sentence, stretching back as time would go, as far back as ordinary consciousness could conceive of time or the notion of the infinity, But wherever the sentence has gotten to would be where we are alive. And the most potent information, that which would be most relevant to us, would be where we are right now in the sentence. But you could look back, that'd be history. You could attempt to look forward, be the imagination of the future. That is, taking prior sentences and trying to put them in new order and to come up with flying pigs. But the very thing I am suggesting to you that everyone is looking for is to be able, if this was possible in the 3D world, to back away far enough from the sentence, to extract yourself from the sentence, from the series of sentences, and to see that all the sentences were arbitrarily, or in a sense artificially, combed out of an infinite statement, and that every sentence, whether it apparently had a scientific, religious, psychological basis, in and of itself had some validity. Withal, all such sentences are free from invalidity. That it is a mistake to say that any sentence that ordinary consciousness has extracted from an infinite statement is completely invalid. I suggest that that is fallacious observation. If it came from an infinite sentence, it's got some validity. It may prove in that time and place in the sequential world that the sentence that was extracted, they put the period in the wrong place. They stopped the sentence too soon, they let it run on too long, and it proved less than to be profitable. And in the sequential world, the horizontal run of time, tomorrow, 10 sentences down the line, somebody may come along and say, wait, if we move the period, if we put a semicolon back where they had a period between sentences 2,472-7 and some other sentence, if we put them together, then what they were attempting to look at back in such and such time now makes sense. New discovery, new breakthrough. It is all part of this infinite sentence, or infinite statement. It is a continual comment of life itself. And I ask you again, as obtuse as some of this may strike you for me to begin this evening on such a pushy note, still you should find it curious that just my superficial telling of some areas of particle physics, that this is the very things that they think that they are getting to while attempting to find the basic building blocks of, quote, reality. But all they're ever going to find on that basis, that is ordinary consciousness, is going to be refined sentences, not refried sentences, not refined beans. They're going to have refined sentences. Some old ones stuck together, imaginary new ones of tomorrow stuck with an old one, some periods removed, some commas put in, some commas removed, some periods put in, some semicolons turned upside down. The infinite statement is what all the mystics are looking for. The infinite statement is what the scientists are looking for. The infinite statement is what life is talking to about itself, but life cannot remember everything that it's ever said or thought. I hate to tell you. Can you? Can you remember everything that you've ever thought all at one time? If you could, that would be your infinite statement. If you could, you would have a moment that would make the word epiphany sound like it came out of a cornflakes box as some kind of premium. But you cannot. Ordinary folks, of course, still believe that their gods can do anything. But I assure you that their gods, if they operated, if they lived and existed on the basis the ordinary consciousness believes they do, they may have the stories about people's gods and reminding them of covenants they had made and promises they had made. The gods would have to say, well, I don't remember doing that. And if they say, well, here it is, you signed it 2,200 years ago, he might look and say, well, okay, I forgot about it. What else is new? People expect their gods to be a lot better than that. But nobody wants to face the fact or have somebody say, well, can you do it? No, I can't, but my gods are supposed to. Then another reasonable question, if they could hear it, would be, why do you imagine your gods can do that? If you get them past the point of saying, well, they just can. You said, why is it that humans believe that their gods, any group, any tribe, any neighborhood on this planet at any given time, if you take their descriptions of their gods and all the things their gods can do, and you say, can you do any of these things? Such as you never forget anything you ever said. Well, certainly I can't do that. But that's one of the attributes of your God, some of these stories about how they make promises. They're going to get even with somebody, or going to repay some good deed, and it takes thousands of years, and the gods never forget. That's right. But you can't do that. You can't remember what you said last week. No. Do you find it curious that everything that people imagine about their gods are things they can't do? Of course, if you're simple-minded in a non-enriched sense, you may say, well, certainly, that's the whole purpose of being gods. But if you say that, you missed it. How come gods are not great at something that you can do? It's not the way it works. But then if anybody could hear that, then I suggest to you that there is something not necessarily rotten in the Scandinavian area, but in the world of sequential events. Because everything that you find to be lacking, everything such as your memory, that you cannot remember everything you ever thought, or everything you've ever said, everything you ever promised, that is suddenly turned into one of the absolute, incontrovertible attributes of your God, your neighborhood's gods. That should be telling you something. Not an attack, not pointing out that you, among all people, are weak in this area, but that all of the humanity's gods do not excel in anything that you can do. Like you've got a terrible temper, or you come from a neighborhood, a community, a country, a race, some little tribe somewhere that is known, all of you have just absolute terrible tempers. I'm talking about, let's be realistic, I'm talking about terrible. That there's a fist fight every time somebody says, have a nice day. Or what time is it? They're liable to get you kicked in a private area of your body. Do you think that that group of people would have gods and stories about their gods of having worse tempers? Or what if they all had humongous size noses? To make it cruder than apparently just attributes, how about just physical characteristics? You know that their God is not going to have even a bigger nose. Their God's going to have a little teeny-weeny wasp nose all turned up, real cute, a little button nose, right? Little cute nose, and he's going to be the most passive, unhostile God you could imagine. Except for certain areas of the Protestant faith and Republican youth committees, I suggest that there is something that can be learned from that. Not sequentially, because it doesn't make any sense. You could look at it, if you cared to. It's like there would be a seamless office somewhere of universal awareness. And ordinary consciousness is like a correlating and folding machine. If anyone's consciousness took that personally, I'd say you folded it just right. But it would be as though there were an office, be the universal seamless office, wherein all the real activity goes on. And an ordinary man stumbles into it. Of course, he's there already. I got to make this verbally make some kind of sense. He stumbles into it or finds himself working there. This beautiful, unique gift he has, I was suggesting to you, in this great universal seamless office of infinite awareness, you and your little consciousness would be a correlating and folding machine. That is what ordinary awareness is. That you're not dealing with a seamless universe, you're dealing with a folded map. If it did not have creases in it, if it didn't have torn places, if it didn't have places where the map had been folded over and over and over, that your forefathers had folded it, their genes folded it. Now you keep folding it, people around you won't fold it another way, which just spurs you on to fold it back like it used to go, or at least threaten them, quit trying to refold my map. Were it not for that, it'd be like ants being on an infinite picnic table. The scouting ants, at least, the rest of the ants would then be on an infinite napkin. There would be no boundaries. They could not even tell the drawings of a chocolate cake or potato salad. How are you going to draw anything in a 3D world if there are no lines to it? How can you draw a cartoon of a chocolate cake if I say, well, don't do the outline now of the cake? That is what would be an infinite map. From a different viewpoint, that is what the infinite statement would be, is that you would attempt to hear it with ordinary consciousness, and I'll give you one of two ways. You would either hear nothing, or you would hear a kind of noise that would make the Tower of Babel or Manhattan at 5 o'clock sound like a grandfather's clock. You would either be hearing everything at once or you would hear nothing. I shouldn't always give you two choices because it's not always the best thing. By and large, people will hear nothing. You can say, listen. People say, well, what? You say, listen, just listen. Can you hear what's going on? I don't hear anything. They didn't even hear anything until they said that. They was not even aware that they didn't hear anything until they said, I don't hear anything. Does that sound like any of the people trying to take the Copenhagen interpretation that these atoms don't exist until we measure them? Well, listen. Well, I'm listening. Well, what do you hear? Nothing. But you didn't even not hear nothing until you said, I don't hear nothing, until you attempt to measure it, until you observed it with ordinary consciousness, until you folded, until you creased the map, until you stopped the sentence somewhere. By you saying, well, I don't hear anything. You heard something. You heard a sentence out of the infinite statement. The sentence you heard was you saying, I don't hear anything. As I've hinted and stated outright, everybody knows, in a sense, everything. You know everything you need to know, which is one reason everybody believes that all secret information is out there somewhere, that everything they want to know is somewhere, that you know everything you need to know, but it's all folded up. It's as though everybody had a piece of paper and it had all the information you need to know. It's like it's all folded up, and you look down at it, and you see little pieces here and there. And you say, well, I believe I know this, and I believe I know this, and you turn it over. Then when you move it to where it's been folded, you forget the other part. It's all like in bits and pieces. You get to a certain point, and you think, I've almost got something. I almost understand why people mistreat each other. But then you get to a place, and the map's now been folded. And you turn it over, and it says something else. Now you can't remember where the sentence started, and you have to make a new sentence. If in some way you could take it all, and take out all the periods, all the commas, and turn it into your own infinite statement, I suggest again you would certainly have something. You would have everything with no period that you had ever said. Of course, we're being magnanimous. Everything that's been said through you. Every passion that's ever flowed through you. Every act that you physically had gone through, if they were all strung out into an infinite statement and you had the ability to be aware of it. No commas, no question marks, no periods. Would you believe me that you'd be in, shall we say, a very unusual condition? You would not be fit to drive heavy machinery at that time. You would not be willing to call your mother and ask, how's everything going? You probably should not go see a priest, rabbi, minister, psychologist. Me and other people keep using terms since we have to talk about consciousness, awareness, the mind, me saying the yellow circuits. My descriptions are more up to date. They get closer to the interaction of one's total being, the interaction of one's total being to out there, to the point to realize that the interaction, the nexus is such, there is no workable out there. Ordinary consciousness, though, has folded part of its internal maps, part of its sequential statements, breaking down the eternal, or its sequential sentences, breaking down the eternal statement, is being able to fold its awareness in each person's map, each person's piece of information. Your file, your map of how you're living and where you've been is folded right here, right at the ends of your skin, the ends of your senses, the ends of your imagination, the ends of your awareness of you being an individual person. And so your map is folded right where it seems to be I plus not I. The fold is plus. And so you turn it over, and sure enough, it's a different part of the map. There's out there. There's not I. Turn back over, and there's I. There's me. There's everything I think, everything I feel, everything I remember, everything I hate, everything I suspect, everything I'm afraid of. And let's see. And then over, oh, and then here, there's everybody else that makes me mad, that makes me afraid. There's not I. And there's I. But nobody can remember. Nobody can take it and straighten it out and realize that it's all one thing. Even if you could, if ordinary consciousness could do that, it wouldn't make any sense. To ordinary consciousness, it would be some kind of irrational babble. All mysticism, as it's called, all religious enlightenment, the payoff of this, whatever it is, whatever it's called, in a sense is being able to take all of this that you have experienced, all this that has flowed through you, and you take it out, and it's as though somebody smoothed it out, and you look down, and you, plus not you, plus everything that has flowed through you, the creases are gone. You unfold it, and there it is. And you realize, if you're going to look at it in the sequential world, reading from left to right in this part of the world, it starts, and there are no commas, there are no periods, and that's it. In such a condition, still playing with the apparent 3D world, you must understand there would be no digital information. There would be no apparent opposites. There would be no room, there'd be no time or room for comparisons. You can't compare without commas. You got to have damn commas to compare anything. You got to have some kind of punctuation. I guess you could put in parentheses, brackets, dashes. But to compare things, you have got to have punctuation. That is, a crease. You got to fold them out. If you got it unfolded, if you were dealing with an infinite statement, if you were dealing with a seamless map of your life, there's no time, there's no place for comparisons. There's no way to compare how you've been treated as opposed to mistreated. There's no way to compare whether your parents treated you good, whether your past 3 husbands or wives treated you badly, whether the whole world seems intent in making you a receptacle for its collective urinalysis. There's no way to compare it. Many of you who are real sharp, if you followed that right quick, I can't stay with that too long or give somebody a headache. You might also see that that would infringe upon your individual civil rights to feel as a human, because you would have to be able to punctuate, to break down this unfolded map, to break down the infinite statement of you, your life thus far, to detail, to limn human experience, human feelings, emotions, you have got, again, to have creases. You've got to have folds, you've got to have punctuation to describe ordinary passions. If you got no punctuation, you couldn't describe how you felt as an ordinary human. Nothing else, you got to have quotation marks. You got to have a comma, getting up to the point that I told the person, comma, quotation marks, this is the kind of shit up with which I shall not put. You cannot treat me this way, period. Close quotations. How else are you going to describe? It's impossible to describe ordinary human emotions without punctuation. You got to be able to fold the map somewhere. You got to have a crease in it. Those of you who are double sharp, I might suggest to you that a crease in the map of your life thus far passes for human emotion. It's a wrinkle. It's somewhere that you've taken a decent map. There you were, all your life, you attempted to be decent. Here it is. We're reading, it's going along here, how I tried to be a decent person by you-know-who. By Mr. or Ms. or Ms. Moi. And here it is, I've tried to be a decent person, I did this and that. And you get, and suddenly it runs out of space and it's folded, and you turn over here, and it's something about the dog races. It's something about fixing elections, pollution of the environment. They're finding cancerous agents, believe it or not, in peanut butter. And you think, what the hell was I up to? And then you're back to how you've been mistreated. And where does all this lead? And then it reminds you, oh, now you remember what your uncle did to you. You remember that. Well, we don't go into it here, but you remember when you were just about 7 years. Oh, wait a minute. I would suggest you, if you were double or triple sharp, if I hadn't given you a headache already, that when you get to the creases, inter alia, the creases pass for human emotion. They got edges to them. They're crinkly. They're never smooth. You're going along, you can feel it, and suddenly there's a wrinkle in your map, in your script. There it is. There's human emotion. Ooh, I don't feel good. I've been mistreated. Look what somebody did to me. But if you get all smoothed out and there was no punctuation, how would you know how you felt? You wouldn't be able to say it. And anybody that's quadruply smart and alert might remember that I've encouraged everybody is don't ever tell anybody how you feel. Maybe that sounds like some kind of psychological trick, but what if you didn't tell anybody how you felt and you found out if I don't tell anybody how I feel and the correct changes did take place in your own system to find out, well, hey, I don't even feel anymore. At least I don't feel the way I used to say I felt. I don't feel the way the partnership feels. All I got to do is listen. Of course, at your stage of the game, that's dangerous because you listen and suddenly you're in agreement. But all of you know that, right? You're supposed to know that. Things are okay until I listen to what's going on. Then the crash of 29 just around the corner. I'm back in it. I'm ready to jump out a window on Wall Street. My stock has plummeted. Every time I listen, my stock is plummeted. Every time I listen, every ounce of reason I got shouts out, sell, damn it, sell. The partnership doesn't even have enough sense to get the broker on the phone. Or worse than that, most people's partnership says broker, broker. God, who do I call? Who do I call? Of course, everybody would finally find somebody to call. If they didn't, we wouldn't have churches. A few of the little aspects of this infinite statement, a seamless universal office for an ordinary consciousness. I'll say it for a third time. I didn't put in much theater, but did all of you understand there was a certain kind of pseudo-sarcasm, a sneer when I said, and what would be the universal seamless office of infinite awareness, your consciousness, ordinary consciousness, line-level consciousness would be sneer. This great thing would be, I'll tell you how great it is, like a very cheap, like from a discount office supply store, ordinary consciousness is a correlator folding machine. That's it. See, that was a little bite I want everybody to realize. But along those lines, I was going to point out a few other things. In life, it has been noted, all the way from battlefield confrontations between armies, to football games, to chess matches, to debating teams. Out in ordinary life, the life of life has had ordinary people make such observations along these lines. I can't conjure up necessarily a quote, but it's just because I can normally do better than those I quote. But somebody will observe that back during some battle, or during a football game, or two guys shooting pool for large sums of money playing 8-ball, it's as though times continually happen. This is just ordinary people observing this now. I haven't got to my part yet. Let's say it's as though one team, or one person, but oftentimes I'll talk about the team or an army, one football team seems to begin just suddenly, just like in a matter of seconds, to sense some kind of weariness, a tiredness, a weakness in some aspect of the other team's defenses and offenses, their ability to play. And then this team, without any great comment, the opposing team then begins to move to that area. And the tide of battle changes, whether it be a football game or actual warfare out on the battlefield. And all of you, whether you've got an awareness of it or did have, all of you have been through that. You've been through it shooting pool, shooting baskets. You've been through it in conversations with people when you're apparently discussing something. But all of you, at least men, should have some awareness, no matter what you made of it at the time, that you and somebody else, or a pickup team, 2 or 3 guys on your side and 2 or 3 guys pick up another little team and you're shooting baskets. Or maybe it was you shooting pool for a sum of money that would almost hurt you if you lost. And it's like things are going along and you feel the pressure and it seems to be a tug of war going back and forth. And then it's as though some of you may have thought at the time that there was some kind of unusual message that maybe you should learn something from. But at any rate, all of you should remember that there seem to be times that the other team or the other guy seemed to have suddenly weakened, or he exposed some weak part, or he seemed to got tired, and right then you knew it. And it was as though a vacuum happened and you stepped right into it. You'll hear this, turn on Monday Night Football, turn on the NFL on Sunday, and you'll hear people saying that. That, hey, yeah, did you notice the Rams suddenly, they understand, and they come out with, forget the details of what the guy says, but he says it's almost as though Washington has been tired out from too many games and the high scores have been put against them. Did you notice it was just, I could identify it as a play before last when so-and-so dropped the ball. It was as though suddenly the Raiders understood, they smelled blood, and the whole tide changed. That is a correct observation, except for this. What ordinary consciousness cannot perceive is that it's looking at the normal internal workings of a complete system readjusting itself. But that is in the realm of the infinite statement. That is in a realm where there is no beginning and end of a sentence. Ordinary consciousness must cut it up into a sequential sentence. It must take this information, this observation, and fold it to where apparently that we're talking about external observations, 2 armies, 2 football teams, or you and some other person, a you and a not you out there, and that something happens. Maybe you can recall times that suddenly you thought you were about to win something. It's like you just ran out of energy or you ran out of interest. And you just realize as soon as that happened, I'm done for. It was like the other guy, your opponent, or the other team. Suddenly their eyes flashed and their canines glittered, and sure enough, they leaped at your throat and it was all over. The observation is, with ordinary consciousness, that all of this is something taking place between either you and an out there or 2 other out theirs. That in some way there are 2 separate systems, 2 organizations, 2 teams, 2 armies, 2 groups of people, 2 countries, in some kind of conflict, and there's some kind of dance going on. And one seems to trip, or his legs begin to give out. This nation begins to lose its will, and the other one is on it. But what ordinary consciousness cannot see in a seamless universe is all this is the internal readjustments of one complete system. And that sure enough, something gives over here and something moves, but it's not two isolated, two separate armies, groups, races, religions, people. It's the readjustment internally in a complete system. It is readjusting itself. If you begin to see this, you realize that history cannot be written down on pages. Not as long as you got punctuation. Ordinary consciousness cannot perceive history other than with punctuation. It cannot perceive that we are inside. Let me redo Shakespeare. One that I've heard all my life, and all of you have heard, it's been going on for hundreds of years. It's roughly this. Of all the world's a stage, and all men are but players. Close. Close, but no cigar. Not today. Because, let me redo it. Let me bring it up to date. All of life is life, and we are but some of its inner processes. That's what he was getting at. Except that doesn't even make much sense. And I can guarantee you this is not going to be written down and passed, and that will not be quoted hundreds of years from now, such as people quoting Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, and all men are but players. That makes sequential sense. Allegorically, otherwise, because it is something that you can fold, you can separate. You can separate the allegorical pictures from the literal pictures of a stage and what men do. Plus, it is all apparently observable as an out there phenomenon. And my, quote, improvement on it can't make that kind of sense. To begin with, the opening of my sentence, my revision of Shakespeare, is too encompassing. The beginning of it is all of life is life. That's it. That didn't make any sense. That is not going to be remembered. I will not be famous. That will not be put on my tombstone. I will not be listed in famous and semi-famous great statements and ideas of the world that all of life is life. Yeah, give me a break. The man was a genius. Who else could have said that? Because the ordinary consciousness, again, you can look at two ways. It either is just absolute insane, it's just irrational, it's meaningless, or else, hey, what else is new? That's true, but so what? But in both cases, see, those sentences or those comments, those reactions are punctuated. But all of life is life, and we are but some of its inner processes. That is, that all of these phenomenons, such as me saying a team, ordinary observations, that a team apparently has weakened, tired in a certain area of its operations, and almost in a mystical manner, yeah, the other team. Well, I'm talking about ordinary people. They would say it's almost magical. It's weird. It's weird that the other team, they can sense it. They don't have to get together and have a huddle. They don't discuss it. They don't vote on it. That one football team, apparently that one side of the line just begins to weaken. They go into another play even without a huddle. It's almost magical that they seem to sense, like some kind of, like animals in a battle, they seem to sense where to run to. But you can make the same observation if it had helicopters years ago with the great infantry wars of hundreds of years ago. If you get above a big plane and saw hundreds of thousands of troops of two armies, you would see, if you get down and look, that suddenly over here it was like two great organisms running at each other, and all this blood and guts and noise and smoke and dust coming up, and then like over here, suddenly it would be as though one team, one army weakened in one spot. The other army didn't say, wait a minute, they didn't call a conference. Almost magical. Suddenly where they seemed to weaken, a tire over here, there was a flood of the opposing army. As though there was almost secret information that one army, one opponent, one foe, almost as though in some magical way was telling the other one, hey, here's where to get me. We're giving out over here. The left side of the line is weak. the left nose guard, our right end. Two of our best players are gone. We got inexperienced players over here. They're getting tired. It's as though one army out of hundreds of thousands of their men on the field, that one area over here, it says over here, back then I don't guess they call it, but they said over here near Company C, we're losing a lot of men. They're inexperienced. They're getting weak. Come over here and get us. It's as though that takes place. Does anybody remember any of the things about physics? One of the others I pulled out once, just to prove I was right, about that they find very strange things taking place that apparently you can affect at that level atoms over here, and it affects atoms somewhere else, which may fit into the non-local theorem, but it also fits into this, as I pointed out to you before all of this. So everything that a man accepts and rejects is in continual secret communication. Everything that a man apparently knows and does not know is in continual, instantaneous, unrecognized communication. Everything a man believes in and everything a man disbelieves in, same story. Inside, instead of talking about two football teams or two armies, inside of you, there is an unrecognized, instantaneous, continual communication between those factions that seem to be warring. And one of them says when you're weak, how do you explain that any human, any reasonable human would say, I've decided I'm not going to do so-and-so. And then they do it. And say, Jesus, I meant I wasn't going to do that anymore. I know what it is. I'm convinced it does me no good. I'm going to stop it. Simplicity itself. If they can send men to the damn moon, a guy says, all right, I'm going to quit using profanity in public. It's hurt my job. It's kept me from, I've been thrown out of churches before. I'm not going to pick my nose at Mass. I'm not going to make obscene gestures to women when I'm in the temple. All of these things, and then a man does it, and as soon as he does, he says, well, hush my mouth. I was determined I wasn't going to do that. From one viewpoint, one reasonable viewpoint, you could say, how can any human say, I'm going to stop doing so-and-so? I'm going to stop using profanity. I mean it. There's just fucking no use. There's no use for it. How can you explain that a person cannot decide to do one little thing? Of course, there is no sequential explanation. There is no explanation as long as you got to punctuate the question, as long as you got to punctuate the response, as long as you got to punctuate the observation, that, damn, I keep doing the same thing over and over and over. Got to stop it, period. About a little more. I got two or three quick ones. I may or may not leave them. I'm still talking about a seamless universe. Here's one that I have never found a place to pull out before, and this is not particularly pertinent tonight insofar as locale, and so I'll do it tonight. How about these great quiz shows that have been on television for years? Let's Make a Deal, I guess, was one of the prime ones, wherein whatever the procedure was you went through, then you were faced with the guy saying, all right, we got X number of doors up here on the stage, and behind each door is either a prize or a booby prize. There have been other shows, I can't recall the names necessarily, but here it is. Forget the shows necessarily, but imagine that there are two quiz shows going on. And I assume you've all seen Let's Make a Deal, because on there, if I remember, they always had 3 doors. And Monty Hall would say, all right, you answered question so-and-so, it's time now, you can choose. Behind one door is a round the world tour, behind another door, one of the 3 doors, is a brand new car, and behind a third door is a pack of X-Lax covered raisins. You know, you got 10 seconds, and people go, oh, Monty, I don't know which door. All right, you know that, you got 3 doors. Imagine now that you're there, not just a cheap TV show, imagine life itself. But now imagine another show, same kind of thing, with a great prize, or prizes, and then a booby prize. except the other show has 2 doors. Now listen. Ponder. Try and really neuralize the difference between having a 3-door quiz show and a 2-door. They are almost as different as that end of the universe and that end. There's 1 door difference. Go on, damn it, think about it. You ought to be able to feel it. When I say think about it, you should be able to feel something. All the way from, if you got a picture, an actual quiz show, some kind of payoff to your whole life, that there you are with the final judgment forces. All the way from a crude quiz show and routine affair such as that to something less routine. But the possibilities in one case are 3 doors. 2 prizes, 1 booby prize. The other show, the only difference is 2 doors. 1 prize, 1 booby prize. You got to feel it. It is almost all the difference in the world, and it's only 1 fucking door. And it's got nothing to do with odds. If you got a partnership that crude, it's got nothing to do with your chances are better or worse. It's not even that ball field. It's on a, I was going to say a much higher level, but now you should know I mean it is off at a right angle to any question of the odds. It is a totally different feel. It would be a totally different world for you to be there if it was as routine as a quiz show and you've answered the question and you're suddenly confronted, all right, here's your chance, here's the payoff. Got 3 doors, 2 great prizes, 1 prize worth nothing. Or the other possibility, you just answered the question, they say, all right, here it is, the payoff. And they switch you over to the other side of the stage, and suddenly it's 2 doors. 1 great payoff, 1 meaningless. The feel is absolutely incomparable. It is almost as though they existed in 2 different universes. If you can get a feel at all what I'm saying, then the question is, what the hell is up? Almost on the verge of matters personal to you people. This goes on periodically, goes on almost continually, and it's come up again. There's people that's seen these tapes from afar. Sometimes, as you know, people visit us from other cities, have seen the tapes. At any rate, I have had a not infrequent comment from people. Meant they do it in a very good spirit, as just ordinary tongue would have it, of pointing out that they're afraid of me. And they say such things as, I would love to write you, or that I came down there and I visited, you remember 6 months ago, and I came down there once, and you spoke my name and you nodded to me, and we stood around, we talked about football and music, and I wanted to really talk to you seriously, and I've thought about all these months, and the reason I didn't, I don't know how else to describe it, I was afraid of you. I even had somebody said that the first time, just about what I'd said, that the only way that they could say to themselves is they felt afraid of me, and they said that they mentioned somebody that had been around several years, and that person says, hey, isn't everybody? And I started to just leave it at that. I don't think about it, it's not an act, it's not something I'm trying to do, but every time it does come up, I am aware of the fact that even people that's been around here for years, if they hear somebody else say that they're afraid of me, they vibrate sympathetically, like, yeah. Now, let me ask you this. I've never beaten anybody up, never threatened anybody physically. What is it? Because I know it is fairly common once, not that all of you go around thinking about it, you're not supposed to. That's not the point of anything but by itself. But for new people, to say the only way I can express it is, for some reason I'm afraid of you, and then older people say, yeah, I know, we all are. what in the hell is going on? The one thing I was going to ask you is consider this possibility. Are you afraid that if you do sit down and start talking to me, afraid of what I might say? Nah, that sounds too easy, doesn't it? Of course, I have directly encouraged, if not attempted to physically stop you from babbling to me, and then indirectly stop you from babbling, period. So what's the thing that, well, boy, I wanted to really get you aside and talk to you personally and really take advantage of it. And tell you the truth, though, I just felt afraid. Somebody should find that to be curious. It is not unjustified. There's nothing wrong with it. If nothing else, it helps keep you on your toes. It keeps you from the lowest form of mechanical babble to me, because in a certain way, when I say it's not an act of me trying to do it, in a certain sense, those of you that have correctly understood some of the basic requirements here, you would be afraid to get around and tell me how terrible your life is going in certain directions out in the ordinary world. Because you're afraid if you really got started and got carried away and got caught up in this own mechanical idée fixe of your own, that I might say, are you serious? You really feel that bad? And if you just couldn't contain yourself and said, yeah, I probably would say, well, you know, it's been nice knowing you. Be sure and write if you ever get word. So that could be true. If you look at that as being fear, that I would say, well, adios amigos. I guess I just signaled we got about 2 minutes to the tape, so I guess that should conclude the question of being afraid of me. I think I cleared it up. If it makes you feel any better, I used to be afraid of me. Turned out to just be a passing stage. I'm not going to tell you how long it took the stage to pass in ordinary time, but I will admit I used to be afraid of me. If that makes you feel any better. I did get over it. I'm finally going to hit some of these questions. A couple of them I've been carrying for months. One, as you recall, I gave a kind of task some time back. It was like a kind of bombs away when I said to fill in the blank of, in my neighborhood, the primary diluent of VAM-V12 is blank. And one of the ones I got that I wanted to respond to was somebody said fear. Fear, in the ordinary sense, before I get to be too obtuse if I do, but ordinary fear is one of the most debilitating human emotions possible. And all of you should have some awareness, but some people are wired up that if we tried to put a one-word term on them or describe their life, their attitude would be fearful, like a whipped dog, an afraid dog. And that is one of the most, from an ordinary viewpoint, inhumane passions, and it can just almost strip people. They serve a purpose, ordinary people. Now, of course, I'm responding to you people. It can almost strip you of the ability to live. But ordinary people, and you, working with ordinary consciousness, take it as being something other than it is. That is, you take it as being something in the psychological realm. You take it as being non-material. You take it as being some flaw in your personality, as being some kind of unprofitable reaction you've carried over from your childhood, from those good old traumas and mistreatment. And what we're talking about is a chemical reaction. It's just as real, and it's just as bad, but you cannot even deal with anything. You're not approaching anything to even look at it in the correct way if you can't beat out some of the creases, if you can't stop taking the information, the attempted information, explanation of your experiences thus far, and take them as they come out of a mechanical correlator, as they get mechanically folded and creased, and everybody else says, well, this is such and such. and you've simply adopted it. We're talking about a chemical reaction. We're talking about the same thing as if you have a very susceptible stomach. If your IG tract is prone to react violently to spicy foods, we're talking about the same thing, the same kind of basis as that, to you feeling as though you are captive, that you're chained to fear. Fears that are describable, fears that are indescribable. Almost a fear of being alive. It is horrible. I'm not trying to give in to any of you people and say, yeah, if you're real fearful, if that is the mean deluding, boy, that's horrible. It is horrible, but don't make it any worse than it is. It is a chemical reaction, though. And as such, it can be dealt with. Believe it or not, that's all I'm going to say about that. Here's a piece of one. I have been noticing something in my own wiring that is a curious aspect to the way in which I operate, because it seems to be a lack of accuracy. And I'm not going to read all what they point out that other people has noted it to them. As I begin to see it, I am stunned by what I perceive to be my lack of accuracy. Not only my lack of it, but I don't seem to pursue it. It can bypass endeavors I'm engaged in that adversely affect them. I do not strive for accuracy. Somebody points it out to me, and I'm aware that they don't think I've been accurate in what I was doing. Periodically, it strikes me that in some way life seems to reward people who can perform accurately under high-pressure conditions. I'm filling in and just doing a bunch of this based on what they said. Remember, every time I make an example, even if I pull out one of these questions, it is not just the person who asked it. It is not a one-person example. I wouldn't bother with it. But believe it or not, I'm just going to say one thing about this and leave it. And that is, in this particular case, the person who wrote this is in the ordinary sense, but in a real sense, is a talented person. A person of artistic abilities, artistic interest. Does anybody find that interesting? Last week I mentioned an aspect, if we had our own religion, of like the tough shit canon. I think I'll conclude tonight's sermon. You mean such as this qualifies as a sermon? How about to carry that a little bit further, if this was a real kind of religion and I was the head religious person? We could have a theme song, we could whip up the crowd, we could sing, we could be on the bass drum, collect up the money, be on the bass drum, collect up some more money, be on the drum, and we holler about not enough money. But then get to the final part and give the crowd something to go out with, instead of ordinary people hollering, trust the Lord, wait till you die, boy, things will be a lot better then. Which shows why some of us, I guess, never really took to religion, because everybody else would leave and go, hooray. And I used to notice a few people would hang around the edge of the church and say, what did he say? What was it? You know, if you write that down and think about it, nah, I don't think about it. All right, our concluding cry would be, how about something like this? I couldn't resist. Once I said it last week, it got me going a little more. It would be like some kind of final cry along the lines of the tough shit canon of our religion would be, it's not just a joke. Somebody could use this. You might could use it for a while. That the encouragement could be termed thusly: is hitch up your pants. Of course, now you remember where I was last week. So we're dealing with, apparently, on the everyday outside the seamless universal office. We're over in the cafeteria, which is covered in seams and folds, or you wouldn't be there. It's over there, everybody has life dished out. What you've been handed, the size of your nose, the size of your other parts, we won't go into that. How tall, how short, how talented, how personable. What you apparently at ordinary level have been dished out. Fair, unfair, there you are standing with your tray. Remember, that's what we're responding to. Ordinary people fret over it, they whine over it, they hang themselves slowly, they commit suicide at the same rate that they're living, as they're supposed to do. But a few other people, this is not the answer, of course, but a few other people, as a stopgap measure, which you shouldn't discount because a stopgap measure might carry you 10 or 12 years. It's better than you've done up till now. But as a stopgap measure could be, back to what life is dished out, is, comma, quotation marks, hitch up your pants, smile up your face, and cry tough shit. The cry within that, I infer much more than I said last week, and even now I don't say much more because I like it. The more you say about it, the less I like it. It just gets too creased. But inside, the ability to have your pants hitched up, you got to do it. And you got to smile up your face and cry out tough shit. But in the tough shit should be certain attributes of it. It should be futuristic, and in a sense that I'm not going to describe. Do with it what you will. It should be futuristic, militaristic, and oftentimes silly and irrelevant. That is tough shit. That is the proper, religiously proper cry of tough shit. Plus, it oftentimes should be secret, because you're not hollering tough shit at life. You're not hollering tough shit at your plate, at your tray, at your neighbor. You got to know. The tough shit is oftentimes secretive. Until we meet again, tough shit.